G'day. The dirty old goblet. Relax, be very still and listen. Listen carefully to this tale about two rival salesmen who wandered from town to town with their carts, trading and selling all sorts of useful and useless things. One man was mean and sly, but the other was kind and honest. Do you want to know what happened to them? Let's see if we can find out. Now, on this particular day, the salesmen were both heading to the same small town to sell their goods. "Morning, Mr. Johnson," said kind Mr. Wallace politely. "Where do you think you're going?" asked mean Mr. Johnson suspiciously. "I'm going to Little Fullbrook to sell my wares," answered Mr. Wallace. "But I'm selling there," said Mr. Johnson, "and I don't want you stealing my business." "I understand, and that's fine. Why don't we come to an arrangement to suit us both?" said Mr. Wallace. "Oh, all right then," agreed Mr. Johnson sulkily. "So while I sell my goods in the north side of town, I'll sell mine in the south side, so that we're not competing against one another," Mr. Wallace chipped in. "Then we'll swap over," they both said together. So it was decided, and the two salesmen went off in opposite directions to different parts of town. Mean Mr. Johnson stopped at the first house in the north of town. He rapped on the door, which was opened by a kindly old lady and a smiling little girl called Ella. Seeing the child, the salesman quickly pulled out several sparkly plastic bracelets from his pocket and shook them in the light to make them razzle-dazzle. "Would you like to buy a beautiful bracelet for yourself, lovely lady, or perhaps for the sweet little girl?" he said in his best flattering voice. Ella gasped. "Please, grandmother, please, can I have a pink one? It's so pretty." The old woman stroked the child's hair, saying, "My darling, you know I'd buy it for you if I could, but I'm sorry, we need all our money for food." Turning to the man, she said, "Sorry, sir, we are poor. We can't afford to buy such luxuries." "But maybe we could do a swap," asked Ella. She ran back inside and returned with a dirty old goblet she had found one day while out playing. "Please, sir, will you swap the lovely bracelet for this old goblet?" she pleaded. Mr. Johnson picked up the goblet. Noticing it felt heavy, he looked at it closely and scratched the dirt off with his nail. He could see a glint of metal underneath. The goblet was made of gold. Hiding both his excitement and his greed, he handed it back to the little girl, saying scornfully, "This old goblet is worthless. Nobody would buy it, so I'm afraid you can't have the bracelet." "Oh," sighed Ella sadly, as she ran to her grandmother for a comforting hug. The mean salesman went on his way, thinking to himself, "I'll return later to say that I've changed my mind about the exchange. That way they'll think I've got a great deal. It's so lucky they don't realise what they have. I'll be rich!" And he chuckled to himself as he thought about how he'd spend all the money that he'd be able to get when he sold the golden goblet. Meanwhile, kind Mr. Wallace had finished selling in the south of town and now returned to the north. He came to the same house and knocked on the door. "Good day, lady and pretty little girl," he began cheerily when they answered the door. "I'm sorry, sir," interrupted the lady. "We are poor and can't afford anything. Thank you anyway." "But, grandmother, perhaps this kind man will trade something for the goblet," cried Ella, and she ran off to fetch it again. The old woman whispered to the salesman, "Sir, my granddaughter's goblet is worthless. We were told this only today, so please don't get her hopes up. It will be best if he left before she returns." But the kind salesman felt sorry for her and decided to give her a small gift anyway. Ella returned and handed him her goblet. Now this salesman was honest as well as kind, and as soon as he held the goblet and saw the scratch, he exclaimed, "Goodness, what a lucky girl you are! This goblet is solid gold. It's worth more than all the goods in my barrow put together. I'll give you my whole barrow load and all the money I've earned today in exchange for it." The old woman and little girl looked at each other in disbelief. They were overjoyed at this fantastic news and happily agreed to the deal. So kind Mr. Wallace gave them all his goods and the day's money in exchange for the goblet. Ella put as many bracelets on her arms as she could wear at once, while Granny went out to buy delicious food and treats for a celebration dinner. Later that day, mean Mr. Johnson returned to the house. When the old lady answered the door, he cunningly said, "I've changed my mind. I've decided to trade the pink bracelet for that dirty old goblet after all. out of the goodness of my heart. Ella happily explained that it was too late. They had sold it to a kind salesman and got a lot of money for it, as it was real gold. Mr. Johnson was furious. He didn't feel any guilt at trying to trick the little girl. He was just angry that he'd missed out on all the money. He abandoned his barrow and ran down the road shouting, "Where are you, Wallace? I saw that goblet first. It's mine." But Mr. Wallace was long gone. He had already sold the goblet and was sharing out the money to help not only his own family, but also the other families in his village. When we tell lies, we cause both ourselves and others to suffer, whereas when we tell the truth, we make the world a happier and richer place. A wise person knows that honesty is always the best policy. Thanks for listening. I love you, LouLou.